Let me welcome everybody in. Hey, everybody, welcome to TPH Live, 10% Happier live from my living room and the living rooms of some of the world's greatest meditation teachers. Every day we give you a quick sanity break, 5 minutes of meditation followed by your questions. This is a hospitable place for whatever your level of meditation is. If this is your first time, it's cool. If you're a pro, that's also cool. The goal here is really to hook you up with some meditative tools to deal with this difficult time, and also to create a little bit of a sense of community. So let's bring in my friend and yours, Sebene Selassie, beaming in from Brooklyn. How are you doing today, Seb?
I'm doing okay today, Dan. Yeah, it's day by day, as it probably is for most of us. Yeah.
Indeed. I'm leaning forward a little bit because I'm thinking about whether I should mute myself, because every day at this time, I live right next to a church, and the church bells go off, and one of my colleagues, Liz, says that it sounds like there's an ice cream truck in the room. So apologies for the audio difficulties. Seb, what you wanted to talk today about connection, is that right?
Well, actually, yes. In a sense, I want to talk about something that came up the last time I was here, this idea that we're not separate, which we touched on. And that can be like good news or bad news, depending on who we're not feeling separate from. So actually what I really want to talk about is some of the anger and frustration and disconnection that we can feel in this time, because there are so many difficulties arising, and we may be in conflict with certain groups of people or certain policies, certain things that are happening or that are being revealed. So really working with anger around that connection.
Yeah, so, it's easy to watch the news and be anxious because of what's happening on a macro sense in the world with the virus and the attendant economic crisis. But it's also easy to get really mad because you're seeing people with whom you disagree. What's your technique for navigating that? I see there was a bullet point that our producer just sent me that one of the ideas is taking action without taking sides.
Yeah, that's a line from Darwa Tashin Phillips, who's a Dharma teacher and a friend. And he says, we can take a stand without taking a side. And so many of us, anger can be an intelligent emotion. Like, it's really showing us what's wrong in the world. It can be a motivation for action. And that is about taking a stand. But I find, for me, I can kind of get caught in the loops of anger, in the stories of anger, whether it's with my partner at home or against what's happening, the inequities or the injustices I see happening. And those loops of anger are really where we can work. Because often I find underneath that is sorrow, grief, anxiety, the feelings that are associated with what anger is showing us.
Yeah, I was just going to say that I'm sorry to cut you off. When you talked about getting caught in those loops of anger, I was just flashing back to about 17 moments where that's happened to me in the past couple of weeks. So, do you want to talk more about this, or should we dive into the meditation and talk about this on the back end?
Well, I'll say maybe a couple of things and then start the meditation. Sure. Yeah. So, there's that famous quote from Nelson Mandela that anger is like drinking poison and thinking that the other person will be harmed by it. So there's an intelligence to anger, but there's also harm that we can do if we stew in anger. And so we're going to be exploring anger in the body and what it feels like, and trying to go a little bit underneath that to see what might be there, including feelings of fear, sorrow, grief, anxiety, the other emotions that are kind of compelling the anger. But we're not pushing away anger. So this is like anything else in our practice. This isn't something bad. It's just an experience. It could be a pattern. It could be conditioning, and it can be appropriate. So we just want to make that distinction, that we're not trying to get rid of anger, but we're just exploring what's really a helpful response to what's happening for us. And also to say that I'm not going to ask people to conjure up anger right now. So we're just going to use kind of a type of meditation that we could use if anger is coming up. So we're going to ask people to work with whatever emotion or feeling is in the body at the moment.
Great. And just to say, send us your questions specifically on this topic, because we'd like to stay on it once Seb is done with the meditation. So if you want to talk about anger or the connection or lack thereof that we may feel to other people with whom we're sharing this planet, send those in, and we'll give those preferential treatment on the back end of the meditation. Shall we dive in?
Sounds good.
Okay.
So, find a comfortable position wherever you are. You don't need to do anything special. You can be sitting or standing, laying down. You can start with a few deep breaths in and out just to bring some relaxation and softness to the body. And let's begin by noticing any feelings or emotions that are here right now. So again, not needing to conjure something up, but if a particular anger or resentment is coming up, that is fine too. Just allowing whatever emotion or feeling that is present. It can be subtle, it can be strong, it could be positive, it could be so-called negative. And without going into the story of it, we can start to begin to feel the feeling of it. So inviting you to sense where that emotion or feeling lives in your body right now. And noticing if there is a particular quality to that felt sense or that sensation of this emotion or feeling. Perhaps it's temperature, if it's vibrating or moving in any way. And not making a big deal about trying to find exactly where or what it is, just having a sense of a feeling or emotion in the body and how this feeling or emotion manifests as a sensation. And now just noticing if there's anything else here. You can think of it as perhaps going underneath what you're first sensing to see if there's another quality, another feeling, another sensation. And if not, just staying with the body, staying with the emotion and sensation as it was. And perhaps even going underneath this moment, sensation, emotion, feeling, noticing what might be there in words, perhaps in images, in emotions. As we end this meditation, I'm going to invite you to actually open your eyes, if they were closed, to have a sense of the space around you, still connected to any of these emotions or sensations in the body as we come back to the room, seeing if there's more spaciousness or sense of understanding of what's happening for you. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Seb. So Rebecca writes in with this question. How would you advise coping with the anger you feel at others not following social distancing rules, especially whilst, so this must be somebody from a Commonwealth country, especially whilst food shopping?
It's funny because I think a similar question came up the last time I was here and a few weeks ago. And so I think that all of us are experiencing things like this, either for us or people that we know. That I see a lot of anger on social media amongst my friends, at bike riders and joggers who aren't wearing masks or not social distancing on the sidewalk or in shopping situations. And really, for me, anger can be an indication of a boundary being crossed. And in those instances like this, for me, it's really about care, that anger can be intelligent, right? That there's a danger being communicated when someone is not following the practices that have been well outlined by the experts around us that should be followed. And so for me, self-care is the most important thing to consider in that moment. So rather than lashing out, to really recognize that underneath my anger is a sense of fear, of anxiety that is justified, that I'm trying to protect myself. I may be trying to protect my loved ones, children around me, other people. And so rather than get into a confrontation, it's really about moving away, taking care of one's own well-being. I'm not sure confrontations are wise in this particular moment. A lot of people are at their limit in terms of anger and frustration, and I have seen arguments arise, and we don't want to get ourselves into those. Agree.
Marianne asks, I lost my cool yesterday with my husband. He's a Broadway musician and doesn't know what comes next. I'm a NYC public school teacher and dealing with different stress, but I blew up. Help.
Well, I think the first thing really is to realize that that's normal. I know for me, especially when anger explodes, which is not usual for me, we all have different anger responses. And one of mine is to detach and to kind of retreat, which I talked about with my partner this morning, actually. He pointed out that, I was kind of retreating and that there was aggression in that. And so whether we retreat or we attack, to give ourselves a break, that these are natural responses. We are in really unusual and very difficult circumstances, all of us. So fear, anxiety, anger, depression, all of these are really normal responses we're going to have, so we can forgive ourselves. And then to really lean on our communication skills, to take the time to actually sit down, not attached to any gadgets, not distracted, to really connect, whether that's to apologize or to explore patterns together. We were just talking before in the pre-show conversation, Dan, about how this time is really revealing all of our personal patterns as well as our collective patterns. And it can be a time to actually start to heal those.
Lisa asks, how can I take a stand without taking a side when our political climate is so polarizing?
Yeah, that's the really the key question, right? It is hard to take a stand without taking a side, but this moment is actually perfect for us recognizing that we're not separate. We're seeing that. We talked about that on the call last time too, that we are so interconnected. It's revealing the fact that this fabric of reality, one thread pulled over here, can completely unravel what's happening on the other side of the world. And so leaning into that lack of separation, to that interconnection, helps me in not taking a side. One, seeing how I am actually in the delusion of separation when I'm taking a side against others rather than taking a stand against what's happening. The other thing that I've been really working with these past years with all of this polarization is recognizing the arrogance and in my indignation. And by that, I mean assuming that someone else should have a different opinion than they have, given their circumstances, given their entire life trajectory, not to mention their community history and ancestral lineage and epigenetic inheritance, that leading up to this moment, it makes perfect sense why someone else has the opinions, the responses, and the actions that they do. That doesn't mean that I'm accepting the actions as right, but I don't have to sort of attack that. Easier to have conversations with people and to really try and change hearts and minds where that's possible.
Deirdre writes in to say, while I get angry with others, I actually get more angry with myself for saying things I regret or gossiping. I know this is about self-acceptance, but it's hard to do this. Suggestions?
This is where we can really lean into our practice. So this meditation that we just did is really a living practice. So it's something that we don't necessarily have to sit on a cushion to do, but in any moment we can really connect with the emotions that are arising. In Buddhist teachings, it says that we can be aware of things, before, during, or after their occurrence. And so if it's after, that's a fruitful opportunity as well. We'd love to be able to catch ourselves and not say the thing that we usually say that is a patterned habit of anger or gossip or unkindness or meanness. But if we catch it during, wonderful. We can sort of reroute ourselves. And if we catch it after, we can also start to change. But if we add kind of self-blame and self-criticism on top of it, it's actually creating more tension and tightness rather than creating spaciousness and release.
And I think we've got time for one more. This is from Thomas. Greetings. My loved ones suggest I am angry at times when I just consider the moment passionate. Is it possible to misread emotion as anger? Are there any approaches to distinguish between the two?
Oh, wow. Yeah, this is such a great question. And I don't want to stereotype cultures or people, but my husband is half Italian and raised in Sicily with a Neapolitan father. And this was a big exploration for us in the beginning of our relationship and in the middle of our relationship and currently of our different styles of expression. And I have kind of a much softer, and again, as I mentioned, a retreating style. He has a much more kind of forward, sometimes loud, sometimes what I feel is aggressive style. And it's really been a point of exploration for us. So rather than everyone having to become the same, which, can really also erase people's cultures and styles and ways of being, we can start to explore what's behind the way we express, and those differences can also be celebrated. So that's a question that's close to my experience and heart.
Seb, great job as always. Stick around because I want to just do one item of business before we close here. Every Friday, we've been identifying a nonprofit, a philanthropic endeavor that we want to support in the middle of this mess. And this week, and we at TPH 10% Happier, we donate, and we encourage you to think about it if you have the means, even if it's just a little bit. Heart to Heart International has sent volunteer medical providers to New York and across the U.S. to relieve staff shortages at hospitals during the COVID-19 pandemic. Also, because good hygiene is critical, especially in vulnerable communities, HHI is distributing hygiene kits to local shelters, healthcare facilities, food pantries, and more. If you want to sponsor a hygiene kit or otherwise donate, click on the link in the video description. Awesome. Seb, thank you again. Really appreciate it. Great job.
Thank you, Dan. And thanks to the whole team for all that you're doing.
So before we go, just want to wish you a great weekend. We'll be back on Monday with a mutual friend of mine and Seb's, Coach and Paley Ellison, who will be the teacher. In the meantime, I really hope everybody stays home and stays healthy, and we'll see you soon.